Okay, as I promised, I am going to make a pre-recorded screencast or pre-recorded video, for everybody. Once this is processed, I'll post it in each of the sections of BISS 1123. And as I promised, you'll have this pre-recorded screencast. This is for Tuesday, the 26th of March, the second day we're back from spring break. Okay, well, let's go over here and I'm going to go into the Canvas room, and I'm going to work in 1123A, but everything I say is also applicable to 1123B. We're in the same spot now as we come to the concluding Excel case in the course. As I had spoken about Thursday, we're going to see that a pivot table offers us a hybrid type of application. That is, it gives us the some of the functionality of a database. It also provides us the functionality of a spreadsheet, and this will take us back to this notion of the analytic cube. And I'm going to go back over here in the modules for a moment. And we'll take a look at the welcome module. And you'll see the analytic cube as I have it posted in here as we talk about it. And this whole notion, you've heard me mention it many, many times. Here it is. The ability to slice and dice data. Notice that this is actually goes beyond a flat sheet like a spreadsheet with just simply rows and columns. Here it has our analytical field has depth to it. And notice that I've got, if you look here on the side, I've got the type of retailer. There at the top, I've got product. Over here, and I guess you could call it the northeast quadrant, I've got how much revenue was generated, and this is by over time. So I have data there. I have revenue generated by different stores. I have total revenues, and as you can see, I have multiple queries that I can generate using the data that I have, because I have them layered like they would be in a database, or I have sets of tables and I can run a query on them. Pivot table allows me to do that working with a data set in Excel. Now I want to take a moment and go over to Vital Source. Pivot tables are covered in tremendous detail in chapter 43, and there is a practice file. In fact, let me go over here to the resources for a moment. We'll talk about it. I have one of my old case files, and we're going to look at it today, about a company called Pacific Trading. And there's the file name. It's XLS13 done, spring 15. It's over in the files section of Canvas. And then here's the file. This is a practice file in the chapter 43 practice files in that zip file for the Excel text. Okay? And so chapter 43 gives tremendous coverage and goes into a great deal about using pivot tables and slicers and how to answer a number of questions about a set of data. And we look at these functions that they've got here, the calculated fields, the report filter, or the slicer, grouping items, what's a calculate item, what's drilling down, the timeline feature, just more than you could ever want to know about pivot tables. And we're just going to cover a little bit of the surface of it. And the authors show us the starting data set and then begin to walk through the process. And this is over at the very start of page, chapter 43. Let's see what page this is. It's just the very first page in 43. and it continues on and walks us through. And so I'm going to really encourage you to take the time to go beyond what I'm going to cover today, okay, and really dig into this chapter. Now, I don't use pivot tables that much. I truly don't. I know they're a very powerful tool, and typically what I do is I'll take a set of data, I'll work them through a database the best that I can, sets of queries, and then if I have a lot of computational work, I'll throw them out to Excel, or if I want to visually display them, I'll do that. I do some work with pivot tables, but not as much as I need to. It's one of these tools that if you need to use it, you do. If you don't, you don't. But it's good to be familiar with it because it can do some fairly decent analysis for us. And I'll show you this in one of my old cases. But I would really encourage you to walk through, because this chapter is outstanding in terms of walking you through each step to do, each step to follow, okay, as you work through a pivot table, and as they walk you through the different features and functions, and to really exploit it. The truth is, pivot tables are such a powerful tool. They would really deserve a textbook and better part of a semester. We could have a whole course on pivot tables. They're that powerful a tool. And so when people say, "Well, there's some products out there that give me the best of both worlds of a database or in a spreadsheet," I would tell them Excel pivot table and Tableau, which is an open source product that are out there. Those two are probably the best, although I would say coming in at a close third would be SAS Visual Analytics. Again, this whole idea is not to make you nerds or computer wizards or pivot table freaks or anything of the sort. What this is about is, how do I take data that I'm given and display them and analyze them in a way that makes sense and can provide me the way to make a decision. Data are only become information when they provide me the basis for making a decision or drawing an opinion, okay? And it's easy to get lost in learning the tool and not how and why you use it. And I'll be very honest with you. We've worked through many functions in Excel, techniques in Excel. When we went through macros and we automated spreadsheets, we barely touched the surface in using them. And as you go throughout your career, you're going to find that you're going to encounter many products that this course and others like it will have prepared you to work with, because it won't seem so foreign to you'll grasp. There are some important conceptual parts in here in chapter 43. So I really encourage you to read it carefully, work through these. That's why we have these practice files, okay? And I just don't see it being beneficial to walk you through a step by step. I'm going to show you a practical example out of a case, okay? And again, where we begin to build that analytical cube. Now, as usual, we're working ahead, okay? So let's go down here and find out where that's due. And I have a sheet over there in the files section of Canvas. Also, here it is. This is XLS 13 done, spring 15. I went ahead and put it over here also in the welcome section So it's in the Files section, and it's in it's in the Files section, and it's also in the here in this Welcome section module of Canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and download this file. Okay. And we're going to take a look at it. And then we'll spend some time looking at the the pivot table example out of chapter 23 and out of the practice files. So I've got the file here, and I'm going to put it in my folder as I usually do. Now I'm going to put it down here on the desktop. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Okay. And we'll enable the editing. And you'll want to save it to your desktop so you can upload it. So you can upload this file or the file out of chapter 43 practice files. I think it's called Grocer something is temp. And I've got a copy down here I'd made. Now, there was a series of tasks associated with this, all right? And I'm just going to start with the raw data and walk you through the process. This is a company, Pacific Q, and they have, they sell various types of fruits, and they are, looks like, I think they're, if I'm not mistaken, they're somewhere up in Oregon. And this shows the date of the transaction, the item that was sold, the city where it was sold, the amount of sales, the seller, and the store type. Okay, so we have a set of data here, pretty typical of what we would want to work with. So we begin to have some questions about this. Now, sometimes you'll get some, some really crazy kinds of questions, and we'll start to look at that. And in order to create the pivot table, here's what we do, okay? I'm going to highlight the data, okay? And I'm going to click Insert, Pivot Table, and it will say select a table or a range. Okay, now note I can also use an external data source if I choose to do that. Okay, and I'm going to put it in a new worksheet. Now let me say something also. I've got a bunch of stuff going on Tuesday, university things, and I just said, okay, it's a virtual day, so I'm just going to go ahead and put this over here. I do have virtual office hours set up in the afternoon. So if you need to get a hold of me, I'll be there. I have them set up from 1 to 6 on Tuesday, virtual office hours from 1 to 6 on Wednesday. So you shouldn't be crying any that you couldn't find me. And then on Thursday, I'll be there, although we've got another faculty meeting. It's just that time of year and a lot of stuff going on. And so I'm trying to do what I can. But we can put it in a new worksheet, so we're going to do that, okay? And I'm going to call this is sheet number 2. And I'm just going to rename it as, let's call it table and we'll go from there. I think we'll be okay with it doing that. Okay, so we've got it called table. Now, I want you to notice something. When I put my pivot in here, notice that we get the pivot table, and we want to make sure that we can view the pivot table. Okay. And here we can have the field headers and the field lists. Now, when I leave the pivot table area, that goes dark. So again, here we are. Now I want to show you how this thing is constructed. Okay. Now a pivot table has 4 parts. Again, chapter 43 does a fantastic job of walking through every single feature and function, bell and whistle, that is in a pivot table. The case that I'm using here today is one that, we've got some queries. It's a sales company, and it's a way for you to see how we can use it, but it's not going to be an exhaustive workshop in the sense of you'll know everything about them. You just have to work with these every day. This pivot table, the solver, which is the optimization tool, the what if tools like scenario manager, the data table, all those. Proficiency comes as you work with them on a continuous basis. Okay, so that's it. And whether you'll use these or not, I don't know. Although I think you are going to find yourself, you're probably going to wind up using them, or you'll be using something that's like that in terms of a commercial product. That being said, let's notice we've got 4 sections. Okay, and I'm going to come over here to the filter, and I'm going to click on date. Now I want you to notice something. We have dates, we have items, city, sales, seller, and store type. We only have one kind of data. We only have one set of values here, and that's the sales. Okay, so I'm going to click on city, example, and I'm going to stick it over here in the filters. Okay, and so we'll show that. All right. And we'll go back and we'll find our pivot tables. And that's just so strange. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry. It was over here in city. Let me pull that out here. Now think of it as the filter. Think of this as a series think of this as a series of windows, with each one getting smaller, that we're drilling down to the point where we get to the values. So I've got the cities, and here in this company, they served these 4 places in Oregon. And if I want, I can select multiple items, or I can select a single item. Okay. Now I'm going to put store type over here is in the columns, and you'll notice here they are: delis, farm stands, and then they have a column for grand total, because pivot table knows that we have sales, which are quantifiable data. And then we're going to look at the items, and we're going to put the items in the rows. You say, okay, so what's the big deal about this? Well, here's the thing. With a pivot table, I can switch the columns and the rows to get a different look. And I may see something different. Now, for all intents and purposes, you're likely not to. But a pivot table gives the ability to really take that analytic cube and turn it and look at it. Okay? And then I'm going to take the sales data and I'm put them in there. And they've got the sum of sales. Now, if I want to here on the values, I can click on this and I can go to a thing called the value field settings. And I can choose how do I want to summarize that field. And you'll see I've got some options, all the way from just simply the sum to averages, the maximum, the minimum, the product, count, standard deviations, variance, and variance of a population. I'm just going to stick with the sum. And so now if someone was to say, all right, what city sells the most apples? Now that's pretty simple. I'm just going to come over here to apples and I'm going to start. We don't sell anything in the deli. Okay. And that's a very simple process. And I can come back over here and I can use conditional formatting. I could use some gradient cells or color scales. And I'm going to go green, red, green, yellow, red. Okay. So now I can look and say, okay, I see that the organic markets, I sell a ton of apples to them and to grocery stores. That makes sense. Markets, restaurants also, okay? These are outlets where people come. So people buy this stuff retail. They buy a lot of apples. Now, the farm stand, interestingly, that people don't buy many apples there. But let's go down here for a moment and let's look at grapes. And we'll see something very interesting. Now I'm going to come back and use that same conditional formatting. Okay. Okay. I don't want the total. I want the daily. Okay. And I'm going to use the same conditional formatting. All right. And here I am. Okay. And you can see, again, my highest are farm stands and groceries, organic markets, but I sell a lot. That's $8,000 worth of grapes. So I've got some interesting stuff going on in terms of these patterns, and I can do these on an iteration. As you can see, again, well, I didn't do the restaurants, so I'll just back that out. So we're going to use the color scale here. In fact, I can do this. Well, we'll just go. We're doing what we're doing here is a vertical slice. Okay. Now you said, what do you mean? Well, notice I'm analyzing these. I'm using just a very simplistic to get the highs and the lows for each product. Now, one of the other things I want to do here is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to format these data. And I'm going to make them dollars. Because you can get confused. And we'll do the same thing here with the totals. Now, I want you to notice something. Look what's going on. We call this a pivot table because I can do a vertical slice. I can do vertical cuts to take a look at by product, by type of outlet. So this is the product by outlet. I can also do just simply the outlets, the deli, the farm stands, the tolls per product. Okay, and so this gives me just for this, just compare the product by the outlet, all products per outlet, or just simply one product per all the outlets. You follow me? So this is what we mean by a pivot table. Okay, now to do this in a database means I'm going to run a lot of queries, but in a product like this, I don't have to. Now I would have the database where I have all the tables stored for the data that I have over here in this thing I call table. Okay, now I'm just doing a slice, and again, I can go ahead and clear those, but you can see I can start to get some pictures as I work across vertically in terms of the conditional statements. Now, the conditional formatting. Now, I want you to notice something. Okay. Notice I've got some places where I don't have any sales of a particular product. Or for example, I have some places where I have a product that is not sold, or I have no sales in that type of outlet. Figs, we don't sell any figs in an organic market. Why not? I don't get that. We don't sell any grapes in the restaurants. I'd say, why aren't we having any sales there? You see what? This starts to show us some outliers or some extreme data points. And I'll just go ahead and let's just go ahead and finish this, and we'll come across. And again, we'll use the conditional formatting. Notice we're coming across, we're doing it product times outlet, or per outlet. And notice I'm sticking with the simplest and easiest formatting or visualization tool possible here. Now I start to look for patterns. Okay, is there a pattern? Now again, the reason I have you guys use the few text, the great big one, show me the numbers, is because, as I've said before, it's the gold standard for understanding how to present data in tables and graphs, and things to watch out for when people aren't doing it properly, or maybe they're trying to fudge the data. Okay, and again, part of this is recognizing patterns. Throughout your career, you're going to be required to look for patterns. If you're looking at a set of financials, you remember we did the case with Walgreens versus CVS, and we calculated the data, and we looked at the one that was higher than the other. We start to look for patterns. Was one of those companies too leveraged? Was the other too cash rich? Companies, especially newer ones, can hang on to too much cash and not get the kind of return that they could get. Others use too much debt. It's finding that balance that's appropriate for a given industry that's important. And you can see here, are there some patterns? So let's if we look across, we might see some, but they become very pronounced as we look vertically. In other words, we look at outlet by outlet. Each of these outlets, the retail outlets, delis, farm stands, groceries, organic markets, and restaurants, each of them sell directly to the public. I am a Pacific, I think is the Pacific, the trading company, I think is the name of this company. They sell fruit directly to retailers. They're a distributor. And notice the patterns. My highest sales, now I'm looking vertically, not horizontally like I was. My highest sales are in the groceries, in the grocery types of outlets, which makes all kinds of sense because that's the place where people go. I would think that my next highest would be over here in the restaurants, but those are different kinds of accounts. Okay, there I'm dealing. It's a different kind of world in restaurants because so much of it's driven by a restaurant's menu and what sells off the menu versus the raw products that are offered for people to purchase in a grocery store. And then notice over at the farm stand. Farm stands is another area where I have my highest levels of sales. And you say, well, Dr. Harmon, this is simple. You could just simply look at the bottom here and you'd know that. And that's correct. I could. Out of all of my sales of $208,000, 73,000 of it is through the groceries. 35,000, let's call it 36,000, is through farm stands. But here's number two, delis, which is interesting. But when you think about it, delis have a very limited menu. Far more limited typically than a restaurant. And you could see that we sell a bunch of figs and plums. I don't know what they're doing with them at these delis, but obviously something. So you see the sum of sales, and I can take these data, and if I want, instead of looking at a sum, okay, I can do a value fill setting and I can put them in terms of a percent. I'm going to highlight those and I'm going to come above and put them in terms of a percent style. Let's walk back for a minute here. And here's what I'm going to do. And notice the pivot table also provides names and I'll put that in percent style. And then I could just do the same thing all the way across. Now, it's not all going to be 19%, but and then I just would repeat this across to get the percentages. So I would see what percentage is contributed by delis. I could do the same thing by calculating out the percentage of total sales accounted for by apples. And notice I'm just starting to build some layers here as well as this visual that helps me see what I've got going on here. And this will be, and I'll just come on across, we'll take this. Here we go again, we'll just do this. And then we'll sum these to make sure it's 100%. So now we can start to see we've got data here, and I would go ahead and put this in a nice light blue like we had above it. And I bold it. This helps me start to put the data into some kind of perspective. I have a visual patterns I can look at. Now the visual patterns vertically here are a little bit difficult to, it's difficult to discern. The more pronounced pattern that you see here is vertical. And that's because the purchase of these items is driven more by the environment in which they're sold and used than the product themselves, which tells us something about how we ought to do our marketing. Okay, I can come up here and I can do the same thing to get the grand total for by product and the percentage accounted for by product. We'll just do this. Okay, same story here. And I'll just delete that. There we go. And here we are again. And we're going to work here for a moment. And it's a little tedious, but we're getting somewhere. And we're just doing some preliminary slicing and dicing. Now I'm going to copy to the format painter and then make sure those all look the same. There we are. So now I can see I have some visual patterns I can look for, and I've noticed that the strongest visual patterns here in this set of data using the pivot table is by type of retail outlet. And then I have the totals, and then I can see the distribution of sales by product, the percentage, and then by outlet. And as I look at them, by the percentage of sales accounted for by different products, notice they're very, very close. I see a bit of a gap here when I look at them in terms of retail outlets, sales based on outlets, and it's more pronounced. And it's really pronounced when I use the conditional formatting, because I can see that my big sellers are over here in groceries and in farm stands. The two of them together account for 52% of my total sales. This is why the pivot table is such a powerful tool, because I've done here quite intuitively and easily. I've basically provided a visualization, okay, and that's the conditional formatting, okay, and then I went ahead and added in here in the outside in these cells the percentages, which really reduce these, wash these data up, and let us put them into a perspective that makes some sense. Okay, notice now again here at the top, I've got the city. This is the big filter, and like I said, it's a big frame. So notice what happens. I can do this, and let's say I'm just interested in Bend. It'll show me what things look like at Bend. Isn't that fantastic? I can select. I can deselect them, and then choose Eugene. So I can do a particular city, or I can look at multiple cities, and I can look at Bend and Eugene. And I'll see it's those two cities. If I want to change the arrangement of the pivot table, it's simple. I can go in here and I can drag and drop and remove items. If I want to leave this here, it's simple. I go back to the data and I create another table. Now I'm going to show you here in this example what I did. And I'm thinking, at this point, I may go ahead I may go ahead next Thursday and follow up. We may have 2 sessions on pivot tables because I think they're so very important. But we're also coming to that point in the course where we'll start to look at databases. But nonetheless, wanted to show you just some of these very simple tools that I've got, and I can compare one city versus the other. Now, if I want, I can take the store types and switch them around with the items. I've got the sum of sales. Let's look at some of these things I have in here. Here's the Pacific Q data, the original data, okay? And here's task number 1. Now, this was an interesting task because the question was, in what city do we sell the most peaches? In what month do we sell the most peaches? Okay? And that was the question. In what month do we sell the most peaches? And so we did that by using the city as the report filter. Okay. And then notice over here, I have the items in the columns, and I stuck with peaches only. And then I have the dates in the rows, the row labels, and then I have the sum of sales. Now on these row labels, the dates, okay, I went looking for, and these are the dates that I were given. And I selected them all. And this gave me, on the date row, I used the value for the sum of sales. And here we are. I sell the most peaches in Eugene during the month of September. Here's the second task. Okay. I was asked to, in the second task, if I'm not mistaken, I was asked to identify who was the least productive salesperson. Now this becomes more of as much as a qualitative issue as it is a simple quantitative data. But just for all intents and purposes, here's what I did. I didn't use a filter, okay? On the column, I use the seller, that is the person who is our who is the salesperson. And I had no row. I just simply took the sum of sales. And I said, okay, based purely on that, the least productive salesperson would be this individual baker. That raises some questions. Is it possible that Baker had a route or a territory that wasn't quite good? Maybe Baker is a new person and the best, most established routes, or the best or most established territories are those by folks who've been there a long time. So I clicked on task 2 and I said, okay, well, so I've got a cursory answer for that one. Okay, and then on task, I had a third task. Okay. And this is a question about sales to restaurants. Restaurants are very labor intensive. You got to talk to the manager. You got to see how what you have fits in with the menu, etc. It's not like a grocery store or an organic market or a farm stand where you just stop and drop off the product. Okay? Restaurants are unique because when you're selling them food, it's got to fit with their needs. So they're more labor intensive. And as you can notice, is it worthwhile to continue marketing to them? Well, one of the things I did is I said, okay, and you can see that here on the right side, I said, okay, I'm gonna go by city. And that's in the rows. By store type, that's in the columns. And the sum of sales, so that I got grand totals. Is it worth it for me to market to restaurants? Well, if I look simply at the grand total here in row 9, I'd say, well, yeah, get rid of them because they're a small percentage of my overall sales. Okay? On the other hand, though, I'm going to have to ask myself, how will I make up that $28,000? Okay? So I have a bit of an issue here to deal with. Now, again, if you want to see how I did it, it's simple. This is the nice thing about pivot tables. They're easy to reverse engineer. I can say, okay, I put the column as the store type. I put the city in the rows, and I use the sum of sales as the values. And then I did some conditional formatting. Now I can do percentages again if I wanted to. Okay. Now, I have a fourth task here, and this is where the company was saying that maybe they're growing too fast and they're spread over too wide a geographic region. Okay, and just for kicks, we know that they're in. I'm going to get these copied and put them on a notepad. And they're in these 4 cities. Bend, Eugene, and Oregon. So just for quick or fun, let's just go out here explore for a minute, and let's see a map of Oregon. Now let's find a map of Oregon. There's one. And let's see if we can find our cities in here. Well, we find Portland. There's Salem. There's Bend. So there's Portland. There's Salem. There's Bend. And Eugene. Where's Eugene? Looking for it here. Here it is. So notice how these are configured. Now, I did some data analysis, but as you've heard me say before, maps help us understand. And I have an exercise for you at the end of the course where you're going to do some mapping. You're going to use some easily available tools, Google Earth basically, and you're going to do some mapping of a retail location. But you could see now, I'm looking at the numbers, but I want to ask myself, okay, does geography, because geography's mentioned, they want to, they feel they're spread out over too wide an area. Well, let's look at that for a moment. They're in Portland, okay, and that's in the east side of the state. They're in Eugene, okay, there's Eugene. That's the east side. They're in Salem, that's the west side of the state. And then they have Bend, which is over here in the middle of the state. So you say, okay, maybe Bend is the one that we should get rid of. Well, let's go back up here and look at the numbers for a minute, okay? And we've got I have sales for you by type of outlet, by city. And if Bend is our candidate, where do they fit in? So let's go back over here for a moment and take a look at it. If we eliminate Bend, we're cutting out $56,000 out of a $208,000 revenue. That's a chunk. Okay, so the issue of expanding too rapidly, well, is there anybody here that's a candidate? There really isn't a candidate city to bump off you because they're all so close. Now, Salem might be, but again, it's right there on the West Coast, the Pacific Coast. So if you give up Bend, you'd better be, if you decide not to market to Bend because they're the only loan account you've got, then you may have to say, okay, we're going to forego a quarter of our revenue. I don't think I'd make that decision lightly. And I think I'd start to look at, for example, if we look at these, we see that in terms of the grocery stores, Bend is number one. In terms of farm stands, Bend is number one. Bend. In terms of organic markets, Bend is number one. They have the highest level of sales. If you want me to prove it to you, we're going to do the conditional formatting and I'll show you. I'm going to go outlet by outlet. Okay. We can do the same thing by farm stands. Now your book takes you a lot through the functional aspects of using a pivot table. And as I told you, we barely scratched the surface. But this product is it's so similar to many of the hybrid products out there, like Tableau, like SAS Visual Analytics, that it's well worth taking a look at. So we've done our conditioning format here. And let's notice something. Bend, in the middle of the state, is first in, it's first in farm stands sales. It's first in grocery store sales. It's first in organic market sales. And it is first in total sales per city. So the map helps us understand something. So our feelings that we're too spread out may not be entirely accurate, because if we go back up here to our map, we're really not. Bend is kind of an outlier, but I have no idea how far it is from Bend to Eugene. I know this, you've got interstates, and I'm certain that I'm not sure what the highway system looks like there, but you obviously, to eliminate them, you do a lot of sales. Is it because you don't have much competition? You'd have to ask yourself those questions. Now I think you get how powerful a tool that a pivot table is, and how we can really use it to put data in perspective. Now, I also use the map because we wanted to see. And again, if you look at the map here, it's pretty obvious. Portland, Salem, what were the other cities? Portland, Salem, and Eugene are all along that Highway 5 corridor. And the biggest cities in the state, because Eugene's where the University of Eugene is. I think Corvallis is Oregon State. I'm pretty certain that Eugene is the University of Oregon. And you're talking about then that corridor, and you can see they're along Interstate 5. So so you have to stop back and ask yourself, how is it that Bend is performing so well? Is it a function of we don't have much competition and we'd be kind of stupid to walk away from it? Is there a city that we ought to we should get rid of? And this helps us say this is going to be far more complicated than we thought. We may want to start thinking about, do we demarket to particular types of venues? And we had talked about that in terms of going back and saying the restaurants are the most difficult, most labor-intensive accounts that we have. I'll go back over here. And so we say, okay, do we want to get rid of restaurants? Well, we're going to have to come up with roughly, I'd say, well, let's just get a straight percentage on it. It's going to be this. More than 10%. And then we'll put that in percentage style, and it's approximately 14% rounded up. We're going to have to make up the distance somewhere else. We'll have to make up the sales if we decide to leave restaurants. Well, we've covered quite a bit of ground here, and I think that this is a good introduction. I believe that in the future, your desktop will have descriptive pieces. They'll tell you, here are the cells that we had, blah, blah, blah. And then your dashboard will also have an analytic part where you can do some analysis and look at data. My hunch is you'll probably already have all of that set up for you in your dashboard, and those figures and those key performance indicators will be there. But this is such a powerful tool, and you can see how we can use it for some decision making. Well, this file, XLS13 done, is over there. As I mentioned, it's in the welcome section, welcome module in Canvas. It's also in the files section. And we've done some work with this. And so I'm just going to leave this be on my desktop. And I don't know if I don't know if I will, I don't know if I'm going to upload it or not, because you've got this video and you've got you've got this video to look at, but you also have that other file, and you have all of chapter 43 that walks you through. So I'll tell you what I think I'm probably going to do is this. This video is a good intro to what we can work with on the pivot tables. And this you could upload for XLS13 or the other file that deals with it. And we'll just take a quick look here. And I'll go down here, and let me see here. I want to go down to my desktop. And here it is. And I'll just open it up. And I think we'll probably look, I think we'll go ahead and we'll look at this on Thursday of next week. We'll just look at chapter 43. So I'm going to call this, let's say this would be, today is Pivot Tables Part 1. Thursday will be Pivot Table Part 2. And they're going to show us, this coincides with the book. And they have all of these tools added in here. So we'll do some work on that. So this pre-recorded video and then our ground-based time next Thursday, we're going to cover pivot tables. I think they're worth having a whole 2 sessions over them, okay? So your task for next week is view this pre-recorded video, okay? Then go into chapter 43, go into the practice files for the grosser, that file, and start to work through chapter 43, getting yourself familiar with what all of these functions and features and procedures for pivot table. And they're all over here in Vital Source in your textbook. Okay? Well, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop sharing this and then stop the recording, process it, and I will load this. I'll get it processed here and then over at YouTube and then upload it, and it will be there for all of you to look at in both sections. Okay, everybody, I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care and have a good day. Good weekend.